Hi, everyone. We'll just give it a minute until everyone can enter the room and then we'll get started. All right, let's get things started. It is 12:16. Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Cunningham. I'm the AVP for Alumni Relations here at Lehigh, and you are watching a Mountain Talk. I just want to let you know that we are recording this, so if you do have to drop off early or you have friends and classmates that you think would be interested in this, we will send out a link afterwards. I am here today with Scott Willoughby, class of '89. He studied electrical engineering here at Lehigh and then went on to get his master's at USC. As you probably read in his bio and you've probably read in the news, he is the VP and program manager at Northrop Grumman, working on NASA's James Webb Space Telescope. He has done countless presentations on this, as he just told us, to Congress and to the media, and now to Lehigh alumni. So obviously this is going to be a fascinating conversation, and we're going to try to get all of your questions answered. A little bit about the choreography. Scott is going to talk for 10-15 minutes and show us a presentation about his work on the James Webb Telescope, and then we're going to open it up for questions. You're going to ask those questions in the chat box, which is at the bottom of your screen here. Just hit the chat, and you can either display your question or comment just to the presenters or to everyone in the webinar. I will moderate those comments, and I'll try to get to everybody. If we don't, Scott is willing to answer some questions or point you in the right direction afterwards. We are slated to go until 1 o'clock, but Scott has generously offered to stick around until 1:15 if there are tons and tons of questions left unanswered. So let's get moving. Scott, take it away.
Well, this is exciting. Thank you, Jennifer, and thanks to your team, Morgan and Joanna, because pulling off these is a huge thing. Sometimes my presentations are as complicated as building the Webb telescope, but it's wonderful, and providing this opportunity to share with Lehigh is really an honor of a lifetime for me. I have to say that this isn't a position I ever thought I would be in after graduating in 1989. But a few other just thanks to begin with. The Dean DeWorth, I mean, what a wonderful person. His passion for engineering and what he's doing with the school is inspiring enough. Had a chance to meet him and show him the Webb telescope on the West Coast in Redondo Beach, where Northrop Grumman was finishing up the assembly of that. And Professor Terry Hart, welcomed me into the classroom and the students. It has made lasting connections already of students that I continue to talk to. So wonderful, and his own presence is just, it's calming, and he's a genius, but his way of conveying thoughts is also inspirational. And I'd say most importantly, Marcia Barone, who really is the person who's helped connect me more deeply with Lehigh, as she reached out years ago and then started building these connections, as Webb was, finishing things up. So appreciate that. And then one last shout out to my Delta Tau Delta fraternity brothers, who really helped shape me in who I am, their own diversities and backgrounds. Was a huge learning experience for me, going to the campus and meeting people from different backgrounds. So thank you, brothers. So let me go into the presentation, because I really do want to get into the Q&A. And this is a hybrid presentation. It starts with several charts that I have been presenting with a video for about a decade, really meant to inspire people and bring us along with the journey of what Webb is doing and why it's so hard, why it was taking so long, and to give that appreciation for the achievement. And then at the back end of this presentation is all brand new, because it's about what we are now seeing, and which I'm sure people have seen, whether you see it online or on the covers of newspapers or on TV, or all the amazing things we're just starting to do and will be going on for decades later. So With that, I always wanted to keep challenges. I embedded a couple videos into here, and I got a minute-long video that was very inspirational, made about a decade ago, that I would show at the beginning, of presentations that would kind of grip people in. I'm going to do that. Have your sound ready to go with this one, and we'll go into some PowerPoint slides.
The eyes of the world now look into space. We need to be a part of it. We need to lead it.
We are a spacefaring nation. Pioneering is what we do. Today, we chart a new course that takes us beyond our wildest dreams. An exploration that requires a new ground. Currently under construction is a marvel of engineering that will reveal the dawn of time. And behold, the epic creation. Where did we come from? Are we alone in the universe? The answers are on the horizon. The James Webb Space Telescope. America's next bold adventure.
I still get chills, and I've seen that video 1,000 times. It starts with that inspiring voice of Kennedy, going all the way back to, that beginning of the space age, and obviously transitions us all the way to where we are today. Now, I had a presentation I gave for a decade. I've stripped out just a couple slides of these, which I used to call Webb by the numbers. Webb is so complicated, and I tried to make it easy. I tried to make it memorable and to give some fun facts. That where did we come from, and are we alone, right? Two of the requirements for Webb in a book this thick we get from NASA to go fulfill. And I start with a number, 13,500,000,000. And if I could interact with you, I'd look at the audience and I'd wait for somebody to raise their hand and tell me what they think this number means. And you'd all know a lot more about it now, hopefully just because of a few weeks of Webb science. And if somebody would get it right, I would go give them a treat, a hat or a lanyard or something like that. So you don't get that, but virtually I'm going to throw a pin out to everybody there and talk about what it means. The Webb telescope is looking back in time, about 13.5 billion years. And I contrast that to the epoch of how old we believe the universe is. And it's on the order of 13.7 billion. Some people will say 14 to round it. Some will say 13.8. Turns out if you're a scientist, you could be off by give or take 100 million years, and it's not that big of a deal. A little bit harder for me to be off by that much. But in science, they believe that's about the Big Bang time by the cosmic microwave background energy, in about 200 million years of the cosmic dark ages. And the reason we're here today is because those dark ages ended in the formation of stars and galaxies. Our periodic table came about because what was only elements 1 and 2, neutral hydrogen and helium, came together and formed a star that ignited and started building the elements in our periodic table, carbon, oxygen, all the way up to iron. And then when the stars exploded, they created heavy elements like golds and platinums. And then they decay. The reason chemistry is so hard is because of what we're looking back. And if you were only 13.5 billion years old, you'd all get an A in chemistry. But thank goodness it got harder, because that harder is what we all, are constituted of today, our planet, our atmosphere, our bodies. So looking back in time is about literally finding light that had left these stars that long ago. And it took that long to get to us because it occurred at a distance far enough away from us. And we need to collect that. I'm going to explain that in the architecture. But that's just one part of what Webb's going to do. It's going to really look at all phases, including things, that are near and close to us, therefore more temporally, aligned with us in time, all the way back to these beginnings. It's also going to look in the atmospheres of exoplanets to see. These are planets now that we didn't know when we started the program. There's over 5,000 confirmed ones, in belief that there's millions or billions of those out there around other stars. And do they have signs of life in them? We have built an instrument that can interrogate if there's an atmosphere of an exoplanet and look for signs that look like our atmosphere, which is amazing. So what made this telescope, so challenging to observe these earliest faintest galaxies or these nearby planetary systems in this level of detail? Well, we had to make a huge mirror. The size of Hubble was not enough. These photons are so faint and we get so few of them, you need to collect more. We have to look in the infrared, which is an incredible challenge because these infrared wavelengths, we don't see them in our eyes. We can develop instruments like night vision goggles to see them, but they bring us to that third point, which is you have to be colder than what you're looking for, because infrared is how heat is shown as it is emitting. So if you're not colder than what you're looking for, in our case, minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit, then all you're going to do is see yourself. So we had to develop materials in a telescope to operate at minus 400 Fahrenheit, only 38 degrees above absolute zero on the Kelvin scale. And we had to be very stable. This mission has to point and hold something so long and so stable beyond anything. And I can answer questions about that, at the end here. So just a little bit of contrast. I'm just going to hit you with a few fun things, talk about the science and get into the Q&A. But we had to build a telescope about almost seven times bigger than Hubble. So if you look at Hubble on the left, it could put it in a can to protect it. We couldn't build a can big enough, I'm going to show, because we were constrained by the top of the rocket. So we have this big mirror, 6.5 meters wide. We have to deploy this massive sun shield the size of a tennis court under it in order to block our own sun and Earth and moon's infrared, radiation, so it doesn't, blur, so to speak, or overwhelm our optics. And we have to do this in a segmented mirror that has never been built before. And if I kind of go and just give another contrast, there's Hubble's mirror. I mean, we're talking about epic discoveries for the last 30 years. And look at Webb. Look at how big that is. But it's so big, we had to make it in pieces. It's also more formidable in that it's an adaptive optic. On behind every one of those 18 segments are 7 mirrors. We can actually reconfigure the prescription of our optic on orbit. Never done before. The first adaptive and the first deployable optic ever done. And with all of that, we're about 100 times more powerful than Hubble in our sensitivity, our ability to collect information. But that challenge was we built something so big, it's bigger than the top of the rocket. So Hubble actually didn't even launch on the top of a rocket. In that video, it was the thing that was in the bay of the space shuttle that got put into there. We don't have a space shuttle to go up anymore. And even that we would be bigger than. But the typical cone of a rocket that protects you to get out of Earth's atmosphere is 5 meters wide, so 16 feet. Well, we built a mirror that's 6.5 meters wide. Well, that sounds like a problem because now I can't fit it. So I had to build it segmented. We had to fold it up. We had to fold that secondary mirror on that tripod, that nose back. We had to fold our sun shield up like a parachute and precisely tuck all those things. And I'll talk to that a little bit later. And then launch this off of Earth and then deploy it like a transformer on orbit. Again, something never done before. Now I'm going to hit send on this a video. This is a 3-minute video. And it's an emotional one for me because it shows the last days of Webb being built at Northrop Grumman, and then its journey to French Guiana, and then the last moments we ever saw it as it disappeared as it went away from the top of the rocket.
Scott, I'm not hearing anything. Is there?
It's very low piano music, so you're not,
Oh, okay.
not really missing anything. But Well, that video chokes me up. It's the culmination of over a 20-year journey. And I often would tell Congress that Webb was my middle child. When it launched, it was 19 years old. I had an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old at that point in time. And it felt like there's your child leaving home. You know you're going to stay in touch. They're going to do great things, but there's this separation moment, right, where this transition occurs. And that's what it feels like to be a part of something, you know, that this is an epic journey, right, you know, for humankind and what we built. So after we left the top of that rocket and we saw our solar array deploy, which we never thought we would, that last little thing kind of almost waving goodbye to us, which was amazing. We then have to go through this sequence. And this is a video you can watch on YouTube of the Webb deployment sequence of where we deployed over 50 structures, 178 devices that were meant to hold it to survive the rocket launch that had to separate and open it up. All said and told, 344 single point failures, if one of went wrong, could have meant the end of this mission that team had to put together perfectly. And that was a lot of learning experiences and a lot of humbling experiences on the ground, but it worked perfectly on orbit. And now we have a telescope that's actually going to last twice the lifetime we predicted because of such a perfect ride up there. Our 10-year mission is now predicted to last over 20 years. There's me in the control center in the top middle and the top right with the mask on, looking for the last deployment, and the pictures on the bottom. You could see a full mirror deploy. That's the video representation of doing that last deployment. And just an emotional moment. That was 2 weeks after launch when we finished the last deployment. And all said and told, it took us a half a year to calibrate Webb from Christmas Day, you know, until the end of June, and then release science in July. It was that hard. We went 1,000,000 miles away from Earth to Lagrange point 2 to get in this orbit that we can get cold and follow the Earth around the sun. So on our way to first science, we get out there. I won't go through this chart, but all of those random dots on the top left are how our mirrors were when we launched. They all come out in different positions because we have to snub them to survive launch, and they don't come into this beautiful mirror that you start seeing on the bottom right. But we have motors in this mirror, as I mentioned, the first adaptive optic that piece it together with that guide star that we see in the top right. That picture in the top right was amazing because we tried to find the darkest spot in the sky with the brightest star to calibrate our mirrors. But if you look in that picture, we saw thousands of galaxies. We couldn't find a dark spot anymore with Webb. Its eye could find infrared light everywhere it looked. And that blew the minds away of the scientists. We were just looking for darkness and a bright star to calibrate our mirror. And then on July 12th, I think it was, there comes these images of things that are just blowing our mind away. Stefan's quintet in a deep field where we immediately built, you know, broke the record of the Hubble Space Telescope. And oh, by the way, we just stopped after we broke the record. We didn't run the race any faster. We're going to keep doing that. We're going to look deeper and deeper in time. Sorry, that picture disappears because it's actually a little video that kind of comes back and then shows it come in a little hard in there. But these were the pictures that were inspiring the world immediately. And in the bottom right is a picture of squiggly lines. That's my favorite picture of them all, because what those squiggly lines did in the first days of observation is found another planet outside of our solar system and said there's signs of water vapor in an atmosphere of a planet. And I didn't think we maybe would find that in the first 10 years of our mission life. And we found it, and one of the first planets we looked at was not predicted to be there. And those squiggly lines are what are called the spectroscopy of that atmosphere. So it's like we are on the hunt to see if we could find another Earth-like planet, and we have an instrument that can do it. And then these images are coming out, the cartwheel galaxy here that just shows the contrasting from Hubble as you come through in this level of detail, and other galaxies in the background photobombing. Everything we try and take a picture of are amazing. And then my last slide is just to transition to the inspiration this left the world. On the 2 days that Webb science release occurred, first of all, the President of the United States stole our thunder. NASA, I was at the press conference with NASA the day after, but the night before, the President of the United States said, I'm showing that. So he took an image and showed that and made a big deal. The Google Doodle honored Webb. The most hits on that day on all of Google were on the Webb telescope. Oh, by the way, on Christmas Day when we launched, there was only one word that trended more than Webb on Christmas Day, and it was the word Christmas. We impacted the world. Times Square, Piccadilly in London, we have stamps now of the Webb telescope that you can pre-order. And my favorite, the Empire State Building lit itself in gold in honor of the Webb telescope, our gold mirror. So it's emotional, right? When you can work on something that has such a global impact, you feel it. And Lehigh, you should all feel it. The pride that should just come beaming through. I mean, let's put it this way. I'm proud of Bruce Springsteen because I grew up in New Jersey. Never met the man, have nothing to do with him, but boy, am I proud, right? I mean, here we are, right? Not just me, but others who work, on Lehigh University and technologies I went into this telescope. So it's a proud moment for all of us. So thank you. This is just a picture of my team. And the last time we deployed the Sun Shield in the high bay, just standing here, a little bit of scale. That is Webb and 50 people standing next to it. And this is an opportunity to, interact and answer some questions. So appreciate your patience.
All right. Well, everybody, as I said before, please put your questions in the chat box and you can send it to everyone or just to the presenters. So I anticipate that we'll see lots of questions starting. That was amazing. I got a little teary when you showed those beautiful pictures that we all saw in the media. I can't even imagine being you and seeing this all birthed. Besides the technical piece of those obvious sort of challenges technically, what were the biggest challenges in getting this launched and through and getting all the money you needed and the people and, sort of those non-scientific challenges that you went through?
I'd say the biggest challenge, which was the hardest thing to call it, live through, was being public and being open about, as we were building this, how absolutely hard it was, inclusive of our failures being very public, right? The ground test failures, which are going to happen. I told my team the day after we had an acoustic test failure that, not saying we wanted a failure, but if everything went right for the last 20 years, maybe we didn't try something hard enough. And the truth be told, you can't have a journey without that. But when we shared that, which was painful, right? You're reading in the newspaper sometimes, people who never spoke to you, but would write articles as if they did, and they would do it with, very salty tones, right? But what happened was, it's what I learned after the fact, or I felt after the fact, is the journey also brought people in to want to be a part of us. There's just something about every story that has tension in the middle, right? And you want to see the success at the end. I mean, every great thing has, some kind of stumble along the way. And then it's that last minute drive, or even Hubble's, blurred optics at the beginning probably made it infamous and then famous, right? And this happens time and time again. So we shared, we could have been a bit more opaque and held to ourselves, but in doing so, we opened ourselves up, but then people were rallying for us. They were sending letters to Congress. They were telling folks, we need to keep this going. This is what we should be doing, right? As a nation, we should be taking on challenging missions like that. So it was dangerous, but it was really a successful part of our, keep it sold journey.
Nice. So there's tons of questions here. I'm seeing a theme of people asking about Lehigh in particular, and was there a specific class or a moment where you learned something at Lehigh that prepared you for this journey?
I mean, absolutely. And as much as a class, so, oddly enough, for my first 20 years, I built communication satellites, and a lot of classes helped me in that. Now I'm running an astrophysics program, and I actually didn't have a clue. I'm an electrical engineer. This is mechanical. This is cryogenic. It's materials. But what you learn, at least in my case of being an engineer, is how to solve problems. So every problem in itself is a what, but really the journey is the how. And that how you take a hard problem and break it down into smaller pieces and smaller pieces. Those small pieces are achievable, and then you build it up into the harder and the harder. That's what you do. And that fundamental thing happens, for me in that bachelor degree. I mean, it breaks you down, it humbles you. I will self-admit I failed some tests. I got a C in a couple of classes that were hard, right? The journey shouldn't be easy, right? Like I just said in this, and there's the smart ones of you who get all those straight A's. That wasn't me.
Right.
But I was challenged. To solve things. And I will quote, not perfectly, but Terry Hart's commencement speech last year was wonderful.
Yeah.
And please watch it, as alumni. And what he spoke to was teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it took to do this, but it's what it takes to do anything. So even as a student, there's a lot you do, and you have to isolate yourself and you have to learn, and I have my own little style of doing it. But then it was my friends who were in the class, that we would collaborate together, right? Or the projects that you did with more than one person that you realize, what's your strength, what's your strength, let's put it together, and 1 + 1 is more than 2. That's what you learn. And that's what I took away.
That's fantastic. And we'll post a link to Terry's commencement speech as well in the email. This is a great question from Mark Mactus. Huge congratulations. There will be massive learnings from Webb. From a lay public perspective, what might be some of the practical things we might learn that could really affect real life things here on Earth, like climate change, atmospheric changes? He didn't ask this, but alien life?
It's twofold. The inspiration part, the curiosities of humankind since, it walked upright or didn't, put star patterns on cave walls and gave them names of deities, right? I mean, this is in our blood, right? To be curious, to know, and now to be on the precipice of the are we alone by this idea, is there an atmosphere that supports life, is just going to be a massive thing. And it'll be a step on a journey. Then something bigger will go out there, the next generation of Lehigh students that will look on the surface of that planet and to look for rivers or rocky worlds, or look for signs of intelligent life that I always joke meant we got to find the Yankee Stadium on that planet, right? So we're going to build big telescopes that can do things like that. So Webb is not the end of the journey, but in a practical sense, chemical compositions and the evolution, how things go, always lead to a higher order understanding of that than you translate to your current state, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's how chlorofluorocarbons, whatever, get composed in the atmosphere, we understand that. But I'm going to tell you what a scientist, more than one, told me is, we're going to learn something we're not smart enough to ask the question. We're going to find something that we didn't know we were looking for that we'll discover, and it'll be something in a chemical process. And then we'll take that back and say, oh my God, that bends a law, or it does something else. And then that applies to broader science. And then I'll leave one other more very practical thing. The techniques in which we develop to build and test Webb have already spilled over into very practical. If you have LASIK recently, or have had your eye, your cornea, and the retina characterized, that technique has been perfected by a company from the testing of the Webb optics. So we have to use, we're precise to nanometers, which is just fraction of the thing. You couldn't imagine how precise the surface of that mirror is. So to test it, to prove it's that precise, that technique is already in ophthalmology. So it's a spin-off, and you can go to spinoffs.nasa.gov or something like that, and you will already find spin-offs of technologies.
Wow, that's fantastic. So we have a question from Joe Helbley, whose name you may recognize as Lehigh's president. He says, great to see you on here and hopes to meet you in person sometime this year. He has a two-part question. One is, each individual mirror segment adapted to the same extent, or are the edge mirrors designed differently versus the center? And that mirror is it sort of looks like a bee honeycomb, right? And that's what he's talking about, correct?
So there's 18 segments that fit together, and people sometimes ask the shape. Turns out hexagons nest themselves, together, and it's in the manufacturability, machinability. If there were circles, there would be gaps, right? So we wanted to fill it in, right? So we took the hexagonal shape. It was very buildable, very hard, but buildable. Every mirror is the same. So they all have 7 motors, one on the corner of each of the hex, and a center of curvature one. We could actually deform our mirror. We can bend it, and we could do what's called tip, tilt, and piston. We can move them because in the end, all 18 mirror segments aren't actually 18 individual telescopes. We want them to act as a single surface. If we could have launched one 6.5 meter optic, we would have. Beyond manufacturability, it needed to be folded. So we need to put them all together. So basically, when we're looking at a star and the photons hit any one of those 18 mirrors, they're in phase and they perfectly come back. So we know they're all aligned from the same object, their wavelength. So we, in a very technical term, we measure 1 micron to 28 microns of wavelength. That's 1,000 nanometers. Our mirrors are accurately aligned to within a 10 or 20 nanometers. So we are a fraction, meaning all the wavelengths line up on top of each other, regardless of what mirror they hit.
Ah, interesting. He also asks, and I think other people have been asking this too, which of the images is your favorite?
I told the team from the beginning that spectroscopy, which was going to be the hardest image to be exciting because it's squiggly lines, was what I was looking for. I loved chemistry. I didn't become a chemical engineer. I was choosing between chemical and electrical, right? Which I loved the Lehigh freshman year. Everybody was the same, and then you picked. I mean, my daughter had to pick her degree going into college, and I'm like, how does she know already, right? And then if you change, you got to go a 5th year, right? It makes it very hard. So we learned all the core, and then I picked. But it was my Griffin on my hall, who was an electrical engineer, who swayed me that electrical engineering was the place to go, Hank Milner, and I followed in Hank's footsteps. So I became a double E. But I loved chemistry. I loved the periodic table, and this idea that we're finding signs of elements, in the creation. So those will be the first stars, or the signs of how those elements are or are evolving around planets, around other stars. So I love the shiny objects, but these squiggly lines that say there's water vapor. I mean, one day, are we going to find an entire water cycle? And are we going to find methane? I don't know. Are we going to find pollution, things we only believe, don't get created at a natural chemical process, and say, those knuckleheads, they had a planet too, and they polluted it, right? I mean, I don't know. Are we going to find those things? That's what I want to see.
Yeah, great. There's a lot of questions here about money, and some questions about will the success of this mean more money for space programs? And also, is there any money to be made by the Webb telescope, or is it all an a cost center, or is this an investment? How does the government and how does NASA see this?
I'll answer it backwards. There's no money to be made. This is your money. This is taxpayer money. And when we do this, we do it to, NASA provides actually all of the scientific information is public. You can go today and get all of the Hubble 30 years of archive data and then go look at it. And actually more than 50% of the current Hubble refereed papers are from archive data, because they'll see something in the new image. Oh, about 10 years ago, let me look. You can go back and look at something, right? And see something different, right? When you revisit it, right? Sometimes you walk away from your homework and you come back and you hope you see something different, right? So the scientific data is given up for free. This is what NASA does for this nation. The money gets through Congress, through appropriations. Boy, did I wish I had taken another government course when I was in Lehigh. I mean, I literally had to remember the executive branch, the legislative branch, and I didn't deal much with the judicial branch, thank goodness. But in that, how we authorize and appropriate money. Congress, right, enacts laws. President does it. He can veto them, right? He signs them. But this is something I had to learn. I had to learn how the system worked and how the committees work. And so that investment, comes through there, and absolutely that investment inspires. I will tell you to the contrary, and it was, Thomas Zurbuchen, the head of science for NASA, effectively said the future of large scientific missions like this ride on the success of Webb, because if it wasn't successful, a $10 billion investment would be hard for somebody to go after. Even if that failure was a learning moment, that journey and that it's just going to be hard in these days where you make decisions on annual basis. So we are going to sustain, hopefully grow the budget. And just recently, just in the last day, I read a big ground-based telescope itself, a magnificent one, huge, thousands of tons, right? Not for us. We were 14,000 pounds, you know, to orbit 7 tons. Got another $250 million to sustain their building. I think it's the giant Magellan telescope or something like that. I'm gonna not say that's due to us, but knowing that Webb is this powerful, and then this is going to be a telescope that will complement that, it gives it that much more power. Let's keep doing this, right? Because look at the inspiration and look at the instrument we can work with. So I'm going to say yes, we do.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. There's also a lot of questions about the teamwork you mentioned, and I do want to note to those posting, there's a lot of technical questions too about, you know, like the specifics of the timing and the light years. And I think we can send out some more information about that where people can learn. I want to use our time with you to really talk about your role in it and things that everybody can relate to, not just the super smart scientists on the call.
Because I may get stumped too, so.
Yeah, stump the chump. So a question about teamwork. You know, how do you find the right people to work on this team? How do you keep people motivated when there are so many delays caused by science and or bureaucracy and all the things?
Yeah, I mean, getting the team for, you know, was hard, but it was actually easy, right? Initially, it was hard because the first 10 years of the program, it almost felt like every year it was going to be canceled. So while it was inspirational, it's like, do I hitch my wagon to that train, right? You know, in there. So as we started building, I don't know, stabilize, maybe a hard word, right? But where we're going, we could get folks. But I found it, you know, that once I described the mission, actually saying a little bit more English, that first number chart, which I had about 6 or 7 numbers, was something I woke up at 3 in the morning once because I had a quality presentation somebody asked me to do. Oh, you're a Webb guy, go talk in there. And I got tired of the PowerPoint charts that engineers make up, very complicated, lots of words and bullets and that kind of stuff. And I said, why don't I just tell them 5 things that they'll remember as opposed to 100 things they won't? And I went on this, and I went on a road tour, and there was no audience too small. I did it in the community, I did it at our work, I did it in a whole bunch of things. And then people would be calling me up and literally asking for jobs. What we had to do is have a very diverse set of backgrounds. This interdisciplinary, work that Lehigh is doing is phenomenal. I empirically got that. If I had a head start on that, right? I mean, because when I graduated, you were in electrical engineering, you were in mechanical engineering. There wasn't even aerospace engineering, right? You were very much in there. Now I'm working with chemical engineers and mechanical engineers. I'm working with people who have astrophysics backgrounds and stuff like that, and they have to come together and then figure out how to work as a team in a common language, which starts with a common objective, right? And go through that, and then. They have to survive a marathon through a series of sprints. We always have a milestone. But my job was to keep them hooked. It was to, get big headlines from when we had wins. It was to hold a party at a bowling alley if we had a major accomplishment. I did quarterly all hands with my team. I was very proud. I would get them before COVID, all in a room, someone, video or tape in there, usually 400 people in a room. And I'd be just very transparent. I'd tell them what's hard. I'd tell them what's easy. I'd share things that the one team on INT didn't know what the team in engineering was doing, integration and test, right? Every quarter I would do that. And that's the easy thing to fall off your list as a leader because you're too busy. You're answering to some other higher order, your bosses, your stakeholders. I mean, I found it a privilege to be able to get in front of a room and lead a team and to provide that. And so I carved time out. It was for me, it was important. I'd sometimes tell my boss, I'm not going to that meeting because I already called in all hands. I'm not canceling and moving my all hands. I'm going to affect 400 people who've got an important job to do. I'll get back with you tomorrow. It's a little brash.
So
but
now you know that the dean of the business school and Steve DeWerth are going to be competing for which classes you come and teach. So Georgette is probably on your list.
So that's what you do, and then you just knuckle down, and when you fail, you own it. When you have an issue, you own it.
Yeah. There are a few delts on the call. One is wondering about an autograph for his Webb poster. I'm sure you'll accommodate that.
You will.
A few people have asked the question about the international collaboration, asking why it wasn't launched from the US, and then what was the involvement from other countries?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the newer generation would show up at the window, and I toured thousands of people or would interact with them. And the default now is it launching on a SpaceX rocket? That has become so iconic in there and known. The truth was, first of all, we made the decision before there was a SpaceX rocket, but NASA collaborates internationally to a great extent because it's purpose built to have that science, just like in an International Space Station now, and the tensions, right? The astronauts and through the Cold War, right? Russian and American astronauts. NASA does that a lot. And in this case, predominantly with the European Space Agency and the Canadian Space Agency. So they both built hardware, instruments, and then European Space Agency through Arianespace built the rocket, the Ariane 5 rocket, which is a very reliable rocket, 100+ successful launch, the Ariane 5 in French Guiana. I got to be on console. I was down in French Guiana for the launch. So NASA does that. They had a role on Hubble. They're going to have a role on the gateway, or the path back to the moon, and elements of how we either do that, as opposed to direct to the moon, and gateways and other things in there. So it's part of what NASA does, is international collaboration, and uses that as another way of brokering, right, a bond between nations. So that's why that happened, and that's what the Europeans, contributed to this project, was that, and also some instruments.
Oh, great. We have a question from a very young alum, Brooke. I thought this was really insightful. She's asking about, have you thought through how or if we would make contact with extraterrestrial life if Webb were to find life forms elsewhere in the universe? Is there a process for that? Like, I can imagine a bunch of scientists and philosophers and government entities sitting together and saying, what is our plan if this happens? Is there a thing?
So I don't know. I'll tell you that. Let me just start with that. But let me fill in kind of what I know right there. First of all, Webb will find signs. It'll actually be amazing. We will find potentially signs of life, and then we'll want to query further, right, to learn about what I'll call chemical compositions. Things are happening that seem like life. We won't communicate, and again, who knows what communication means, but there's huge radio telescopes that literally do send radio waves that can communicate with our own vehicles, that send messages out there on a perpetual basis, and that listen, like SETI, that listen, right, with big dishes to do stuff. So it would be really an interesting thing. So we do this we have to do this now just broadly, because you don't know where it is. So you just firing signals off, and you're doing things, and you're listening in different directions in there. So if you find this something that has what I'll call the most likelihood, right, that there's signs of life on there, how would we direct these other systems to say, can we ping there, right? Can we do something? Now, we're still limited by the speed of light. So if you look at something that's 1,000 light years away, even if we send a signal today, it takes 1,000. So that is, until the younger generation finds, wormholes and other ways to jump and bend space-time in a different way, at current, at Einstein's, belief in the limits, that level of back and forth, would take some interstellar moments, to make happen.
Yeah, that will be exciting. I hope we all live until we, to that day. A few people are asking questions about the impact of the recent micrometeoroid strikes and any other kind of damage that might happen. How do you deal with that scientifically, and how do you deal with that to the naysayers that might say, see, we're not putting any more money into this, it's too fragile? Or can you talk through that process?
Yeah, this is a great audience to dispel some myths and I'll call half-truths, right? Because the sexy story is Webb got hit. Webb got permanently damaged, right? These are impactful words. They grab headlines. If you don't read the whole article, you don't see it all. And if you actually read it, you sometimes don't see it all. Yeah, of course it's permanent damage. You get a rock chip on your car driving, you got permanent damage. I mean, permanently, even if you paint it, it's not the way that it originally was, but we don't have painters up there in space. But what happens is we're designed for micrometeorites. This is the one, message that's been lost. We took a mirror segment on the ground and subjected it to a bombardment of micrometeorites in our understanding of that field, and obliterated it as in, when a mirrors last at least 10 years in this environment. That was our mission life. And the answer is absolutely yes. Same thing with the sun shield, right? It's this broad thing and it's very thin. I mean, those layers are only 1,000th of an inch thick. One of them's 2,000th of an inch thick. And we proved that the micrometeorite wouldn't explode the membranes like a balloon, an elastomer, balloon. It's more like a kid's Mylar balloon. It's hard to pop. And when you do, you just kind of leave a hole and then maybe it'll tear, but we have what's called rip stops in there. So we're designed to withstand this. So this degradation will be graceful and maybe abrupt at the moments in time, but we did see a micrometeorite hit that was higher than what we thought we would see in this one spot. But it does two things. It makes a little impact in where it hits, but we have the single biggest mirror in the history of humanity in space. It's inconsequential to the amount of margin that we have. So we've lost nothing. I mean, if on 25 square meters of surface, if a photon is exactly in that spot, it won't bounce, back into the instruments as it's supposed to. So it'll be imperceptible because we're overachieving in how precise we are in other aspects. So we've overwhelmed it by being better. The second thing is, anything that it does to move the mirror is correctable. So we were able to just put the mirror back in position. We just drove our motor. So nobody said that. We have this power of an adaptive optics that puts it back in. So we can withstand that. Now we do need to understand, is this a freak, what is called a 6 sigma, one bigger micrometeorite, than we had in there by either mass or velocity in terms of what it does in terms of how much it can impact the mirror. But I don't think this is going to be the thing in any shape or form that limits, the telescope's capability.
All right, great. A couple questions about other presentations about this. Obviously this is special for Lehigh alumni, but how else do you get the word out to science classes and to other space industry kind of groups? What is the communications that you and others do?
So there's a couple things, and one is I probably should have had at the ready. And so there's public presentations. I encourage my entire team on Webb to go back to their high schools, right? I'm going back to, to Lehigh to just go to play and talk about something. Doesn't mean you had to do it. Just you learn, you share, you're proud, you're inspired, you make your personal connection to it. But we, Northrop, along with the Space Telescope Science Institute and NASA, the Space Telescope Science Institute operates Webb, and they do the science mission for Hubble. They're on the Johns Hopkins campus in Baltimore there. We've created content for Scholastic that goes into different grades. So we've already developed and put into lesson plans. And one of my, the folks who work for me, my former chief engineer, Dr. John Arenberg, just gave the talk at the National Science Teachers Convention. I did it, 5 years ago. I did back-to-back conferences, one in Nashville, one in Los Angeles. And then what we do is we're building content. So that goes into, trying to really hit in that level of Scholastic at the younger generations, right? To inspire and to create, to allow science teachers to develop lesson plans. So there's a very, road strategy, but then the rest of it is this kind of organic, and I'll figure out, I'll get some links, work with Omar, my PR person, and see maybe when this goes out, maybe there's a link to something and say, here's other resources, or something, like that of that nature. But there's content out there, and you can, present that, you can show videos. There's a very cool movie, 45 minutes. You can get it on YouTube and Northrop's website, called Into the Unknown. That was before we launched. Nathaniel Kahn, a wonderful Academy Award nominated director that did. And then he recently launched The Hunt for Planet B, which on CNN. So you can get that now. That's a feature-length film that talks about the hunt for another planet. And that movie, watch it with the family and others. So there's all kinds of ways to connect in from an inspirational level.
Nice. So now that it's up there, what is your plan? Are you done? What do you want to do next?
I'm never going to be done. This is a part of my life forever, right? It's the thing that you did that, that I get to share. And I keep tabs on the team. We have a much smaller team that supports NASA, that if they have to engineer like a new software patch, right, or look at, how the observatory is performing, I have the technical folks who work with the NASA experts. So we'll have a small sustaining team for the rest of the mission. Personally, I've moved on. It's weird. I kind of moved off the field. I spent 12 years running the Webb telescope, and that probably breaks the record. There isn't a formal record, but it's not typical at all, not in my history of industry. It's over a third of my career that one person will manage something this long. You either get fired or promoted. Somehow I stuck it right in there, it was wonderful. There isn't a job like this, right, that I could have imagined. And now I'm kind of the coach. So in Northrop Grumman, we have a space sector that delivers $12 billion of business every year, right? Of spacecraft and missiles and things that we do in rockets. We do the Cygnus mission that does the supplies to the space station on our Antares rocket. So I work for the sector president of all of space for Northrop Grumman. I'm the VP of Program Excellence. I don't know where that name came from, but I literally go and I coach. I go into program reviews with others and either help them deep dive in a problem or help them stand back and look at it from another thing, or bring in other resources, right, that can help people solve problems. So I fly around the country. I already had a lot, but I've flown almost 2 million miles, flight miles in my lifetime. And this year, I think I've only not been on a plane 3 weeks out of this year or so, because we have a huge footprint around the country. So I kind of go coach, which is really satisfying, to be in that position. Who knows, maybe I'll run another big program, one day. But after Webb, it was almost like I couldn't go run another team.
Right. Yeah. Nothing else would compare. Right. And I'm sure even though it's launched, there's still a lot of work to do, as you mentioned, in training people and communicating with people. Is this the best job you've ever had?
Yeah, I mean, hands down, it's an incomparable one. There was days where surviving the job. I started the job. I should have put the picture in that when I started. I had hair. But it was worth every strand that I lost along this journey. But it was far and away, and it was really because of the people I met and the relationships that then are embodied by something this iconic, of course, is what brings it forward. But we were all tied to the same mission, and we went through the struggles together, and we built better, bonds. Not just me and the team of Grumman. Huge supply chain, there are other companies that, were a part of this, and then NASA. Me and my NASA counterpart worked together for over a decade.
Nice.
Which was, again, unheard of for an industry and a government counterpart to work together for that long. But this mission, it's like, all right, let's let them go do this, right? Just get it done.
You build up that trust.
Yeah.
Do you ever worry that some of this knowledge will be used by bad actors? That the things will fall into the wrong hands, and you see all the movies with the spectacular Darth Vaders, or
Yeah, I don't. I mean, we make a conscious decision as to what we can say publicly in terms of technologies. There's actually certain things that we don't export that aren't secret, different than some of the other world, and we work in the Department of Defense, but they're not exportable. There's some of the how-to that we don't export, and I don't think it's much a bad actor. It's to have discriminators, right? To kind of be on the leading edge. So the results are all there. And so far, after 30 years of Hubble, nobody's said some, science thing has led to anything but greater good.
Good.
Same thing with the science, and that understanding there. In terms of the technology and showcasing this, no, I don't. I don't think anybody's concerned somebody can take this and, do something bad. And there's still a lot. I mean, I could write and give you all the drawings, but to recreate this is going to take some of those smart people who actually had their hands on and doing this. Because it's, the translation is here too. Right.
So it's more Star Trek than Star Wars.
Yeah. Yes, that's true.
All right. Well, we are coming up at the end of our time with you here. As I mentioned, this will be recorded. This is being recorded. It will be online, so you can watch it. The last 3 minutes, Scott, what have we not talked about that you want everyone to know, or last words of wisdom or advice for us common folk?
I think the two things to really put out there, and first of all, I talked about putting the program out there. But I also, along this journey, put myself out there. I mean, there wasn't an audience that I went to outside of even Webb where I would talk at Northrop Grumman to the first generation students, or, to a group of what we call our employee resource groups. And I was engaged in many of these things. And, became, as a leader, a figure, and, was in high demand, I guess. And I know how to talk, as you can tell. I'm not shy or bashful, but I put myself out there, and I would offer at the end, like I will here, for people to reach out to me. I always apologize if I wasn't, responsive, but, and with that, I would forge relationships with people that took different dimensions. Sometimes it was their career, sometimes it was the technology, sometimes it was literally people found something in my background that I would talk about, and they wanted to know. I love meeting with the first generation students at Lehigh, because I was a first. And to talk about, how hard life was for me going to college. It wasn't something I was supposed to do. I was going to be a bartender. That's what my grandfather did. That's what my uncle did. And somebody put an application in my hand, a friend of mine from high school, and said, I think you should probably go to college, Scott. And I didn't think I could afford it. And I knew I couldn't afford it, but Lehigh gave me scholarship and money. And I negotiated with my dad, what I needed to cover and for my job and what he could help me with. So I had to be open and share things I didn't really want to share in the public for two reasons. A, they're private, and B, you get the feeling that maybe if you share something, I don't know, about you, that you're looking for pity, or you're looking for more compassion, or you're looking for more applause or pat on the back, and it's not what it is. But if you don't share something about yourself, then nobody knows that in their skin they're like you, and maybe they can overcome those odds. So I learned to be more transparent than I wanted to be for different reasons. And I've done that, and to meet with the first students is just, wonderful, and to talk to them in my background. And, I didn't get here with a silver spoon, right? I got here through a very, very different path. And to share that. And then folks have reached out to me since then, just to have that conversation. Usually people look me up on LinkedIn and will send me a little IM, and they'll sometimes just request. That seems to be the more. I don't follow, many of the other social media platforms, and then I'll do connect and I'll respond back, sometimes it takes a lag, but I guess that's what I like to do, as you're in your job, you share the hard parts of the journey. If you don't, then nobody will know how hard it was to be successful. And do you share something about yourself, as you've created success, that others can see in you, that may already be, judging themselves as not capable. They may see you very different than who you are.
Right. That's fantastic. All right. Well, if you don't mind, we will send out your LinkedIn profile so people can connect that way. Thank you to everybody. These were phenomenal questions. It was, a tough job to pick those questions that fit into an hour. But thank you, Scott. I know obviously you're busy. There's a lot on your plate these days, and I really appreciate that you spent the time with us, and look forward to seeing you again in person.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. And again, to your team, pulls these things off. It takes a lot behind the scenes, and I really appreciate working with Joanna and Morgan in particular. It is wonderful. Thank you.
Great. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great week.
Bye. Thank you.